Okay, so hello and welcome back. So this is the fourth video for this particular week. We are still talking in the week one, where we are discussing different environmental problems. So in this week, the focus is more to kind of introduce you to different issues, and then for many of those issues, we'll kind of talk in more detail in the subsequent weeks. So let's get started where we left. We are talking about this issue of urbanization. As you can see, in over last say 120 years, and now it's projected up to 2050. So for this 150 years from 1900s all the way to 2050, we had 2 people in the urban area. Now we are projected to be close to 6 now, and it will be around 7 by 2050. So by the time you are in the peak of your career, so you will see around 7 people in 70% of the population living in the urban area. So you will have to deal with all those challenges as well. So all population growth is expected in cities and towns of developing countries. Many will see more in developing countries happening. By 2050, more than 70% of the China's population will be urban. More than 50% of the India's population will be urban. China will add another 30 cities with 1 million population. Whatever they have, they will add another cities, another 30. In India, we are expected to have another 26 cities with 1 million people. So 26 cities means all these resources that is required, the housing, that road network. You have to have all those IoT stuff, water treatment, wastewater management, sewage network, solid waste management, all those things. So who will build those? It's the people like you who has to do that. So all those issues, and then you have to do it in a environmental responsible way. So urban growth will require 100 to 200 million hectares. So this much additional space will require. Now this additional space, we cannot create the space. So what will happen? We'll try to people will try, which is happening has happened in the past. We encroach upon the forest area, we encroached upon the agricultural area. Now if you encroached upon agricultural area, we need agricultural area also to generate food. So lot of push and pull will be there in terms of trying to get all these resources. And this area is equivalent to what was the 2010 global urbanized area. So it's a huge challenge, and it's a challenge for people of your generation to because you will be kind of facing all these issues. Of course, we will be facing that too, but it's more in your working age, you will have many of these challenges coming in front of you. So that's the reason we want to highlight these issues to you when, say, in the first year you are taking this course. So later on, when you are taking your subsequent courses, you try to see the solution from a you find out whatever the solutions are being proposed, or the solutions that you are going to study, which one to choose, which technology to choose, so that which will have lesser environmental footprint, so that we will have lesser environmental issues to deal with. So if you look at this poverty of the world, so it's poverty is again the big issue, the poverty of the person. So here where the white portions that you see is below 3%, that green ones is what will be below by 3% before 2030 in terms of poverty. Rest, the white area that you see is still there are level of poverty over there. So currently, as of May of 2019, and this is in this close, what is it? If you look at 598 million people. 598 million people live in extreme poverty. So you cannot have, say, if you think about sustainable development, if you think about, say, making everybody happy and all that, we need to get these people out of extreme poverty. And that's our societal responsibility as well. As a responsible professional graduating from IIT Kharagpur or from any IITs or from any institute in the world, you have certain social responsibilities too. And one of that social responsibility is to come up with some technology, with solutions, so that we can help these people. We have to help these people. because the money that we are receiving, the money that you are getting in the form of some support or the other is actually coming from this taxpayers' money. And everybody pays taxes, whether it's rich people, poor people, everybody has to pay tax. GST is applied to all the goods and services. So poor people, people living in extreme poverty also do pay some taxes. So, so if you look at nearly 8% of the world population of this much is in Africa. And you see the patches where you see that we will still will have 3% before 2030. So, lot of people which needs to be brought out of the poverty zone that is required. Poverty leads to a lot of environmental issues. Large families, they tend to have large families, pressure on fragile land, insufficient environmental knowledge and inadequate waste disposal, slum areas and all that. Then environment also leads to poverty. If you have a lot of environmental issues which leads to declining of food production, leads to higher prices, poor health. Poor health means cannot work properly, cannot get enough money and cannot have enough money, then it will leads to getting into poverty. Vulnerability to natural disaster, if you have a kind of, if you are on the edge of the society, you don't have much money, if you lose your job, say during this COVID pandemic, we saw that many people were in very, very poor conditions, and that's the reason why our many places people came up to help. In fact, also in IIT Kharagpur, as part of the alumni network, people donated money, and then in this campus surrounding area, the institute came up with that support, giving groceries and other supports to the people around here. So this is those things comes in picture. And there are these are some other international pressure in terms of international trade, war and land ownership control and all that. But as you can see here, poverty is linked to the environment, environment is linked to the poverty. Poor people end up creating more environmental problems, and they have to face more environmental problems because they live in not that better areas, they live in a kind of slum areas and those areas of the city. Now, environmental issues also lead in conditions in which people get poorer. So both are linked together. So to reduce poverty, we also have to work on better environmental conditions. Again, if you look at this, a lot of cycles are there. You don't worry too much about all these arrows going back and forth. It is various cycles of poverty and environmental degradation. We have rural poverty, we have resource exploitation, population growth, environmental degradation, growth of primate cities, urban investments. As you can see that we will talk about those in more detail in the subsequent week. But as you can see, there are several factors. It's a vicious cycle of poverty and environmental degradation. So we have to get people out of the poverty, and that helps the environment. And we have to improve the environmental conditions that help get rid of poverty. So there is a lot of issues in terms of, as you can see, more population growth. With the increased fertility, you will have rural poverty and resource exploitation that leads to loss of sustainability, which leads to environmental degradation. So environmental degradation again increases the rural poverty. So there are a lot of issues associated with that is there. So if just whatever you saw in the previous slide, if you try to simplify that a little bit, so population growth leads to more land clearance, more agriculture like a require of land, urbanization, change in technology, and many times they lead to several environmental degradation. Environmental degradation leads to poor health, less productivity as well. Then that leads to poverty. And so we have to kind of, when we think about poverty alleviation, we have to think about environmental issues as well. So we have to integrate environmental sustainability into more inclusive national development and policies. So the environmental development has to be integrated. So we have to think about sustainability, increase investment and partnership for poor environmental priorities. meet the national development goals. That's where the SDGs have actually come into the picture, sustainable development goals, SDGs, which we will talk about in this course as well. So, understanding the poverty environment linkage, which is not the measurement, measurement is beyond GDP, we just not the GDP part. You empower poor and vulnerable groups and others to empower the poor and vulnerable groups, harmonize UN development approaches, build capacity of the national stakeholders, decision makers in poor environmental sustainability issues, sustain support to stakeholder advocacy, sustainable management of natural resources, improve livelihood, reduce poverty, and all those pictures comes in there. Then you have to look at what is the concept of this environmental entitlement. We have to look at the economic, social, and the political pressure, demographic process, environmental process, their interrelation with poverty, vulnerability. We talked about that quite in detail. Then in terms of environmental management practices, what are the environmental changes required to meet certain requirements. So, these in terms of societal development, all these different factors lead into has to be understood. So, one of the mistake that we always do is what is known as the tragedy of commons. So, say if you come to a newer place, you look at, oh, this is a good place to put up my factory. So, he said, okay, business is great, let us build more factories, I will get right on it, and more factories. So, he started with one, then had two. Then found we can increase our profit by 5% if we just build a couple of more factories. So, you said from 2 it became 4. Now, so then somebody like that comes, sir, all these factories are hurting the atmosphere. It started creating a lot of pollution. See, like at that particular time, we don't really realize because it has not affected us yet. It says nonsense, it's not hurting anyone, build with more space. So, more factories are built. So, you have a couple of months later, you can see several more got built, and as you can see in the back, a lot of factories are built. Now, with all these factories releasing all these emissions, as you can see, everything getting dark on the back, creating lots of pollution, he says, why is it so hard to breathe? That is what we have kind of we need this. Again, I am not saying that we don't need these factories, but we don't need a concentrated development like that. We need more of a, like we need, as you can see, the color of the sky also changes in each picture. Here it is a blue, kind of gets a little bit of less blue. It starts getting into hazy, like where we are in Delhi right now, then it gets totally black. So, if you have, it's hard to breathe, and then he like, the polluted air produced by your factories made the air hard to breathe. This is called tragedy of the commons. So, we have to be smarter. We have to be smart in terms of looking at the choices. Sometimes doing something which is easy is not always the best thing to do. So, we have to look at the development in such a way so that we don't make these kind of errors. And again, you will hear me saying that again and again, because that it does not matter whatever field you will be working in your career. All these issues are very, very relevant, and you will see these issues coming in front of your table, in front of your discussion while you are working as a professional in whichever field you will work. So, you may not realize today, you will realize it later, and then you will remember what I said. If you realize it today, great. So that's the way this, with the tragedy of commons and this concept, the concept of this ecological footprint and the biocapacity has come. So, this is the number of planet Earth, that is, so we have one planet Earth, isn't it? We have the one planet Earth. So, up to 1960s, 1980s. So, this graph is showing the number of Earths required to provide the resource used by humanity to absorb their emissions each year since 1960. This human demand is compared with the available supply, which is our own planet Earth, which is only one planet Earth. Human demand exceeds nature supplies from 1980 onwards, overshooting by 20% by 1999. So, by 1980 on, up to 1980 we were good. Whatever the Earth could provide, we were using those. So, we were pretty nice, we were doing great. But as you can see, after kind of from this point onwards, we are starting seeing we have exceeded what the Mother Earth can provide to us. So, we are in an ecological debt today, and that ecological debt has to be repaid by, unfortunately, by our children and their children and their children, because it has to be repaid. It is a debt, so it has to be repaid. So, this tragedy of commons, it's an economic theory by Garrett Hardin, which states that individuals acting independently and rationally according to each self-interest behave contrary to the best interest of the whole group by depleting some common resource. So, we have to that is what we need to look at. So, we are thinking that it is in self-interest of us, but it is not in the it is not in the global interest. So, we have to avoid doing that mistake of tragedy of commons, and we cannot increase this ecological depth too much, because if we increase this ecological depth, the things may collapse. See, my financial stat is like I may go bankrupt, isn't it? If I have too much of debt, the companies go bankrupt. So, we do not want to get into that bankruptcy stage for our stay on this planet, and so that is why we need to reduce this ecological depth. So, because of this tragedy of commons and because of this increase in ecological depth, we have led to the current situation in terms of ocean fisheries. We will talk about, again you will hear a lot about that in this class when we talk about plastics in ocean and all that. Amazon rainforest issues, global climate change issues and all that. So, that is you need to kind of, so there is a limit to growth and carrying capacity. So, this is your population. Population is your blue line, as you can see that the increase in population, and then we have this resources, which is that a straight grid line, and this is our point of crisis. So, we should stay in this side, we should not go on this side. So, this is, we should not go on this side. So, we have to we are using, it refers to the upper limit of population or community size, that is biomass, imposed through the environmental resistance. In nature, this resistance is related to the availability of renewable resources such as food and non-renewable resources such as space, as they affect biomass through reproduction, growth and survival. So, here also if you look at population, this is the carrying capacity again another concept. If your carrying capacity, so if you overshoot, and then you will have like since this is our resources, we are trying to use lots and lots of resources. So, it is not only in the recent times our population has gone up, it is also the way we are consuming resource today. You are sitting at home watching this on the video, and many of you might be having, say if you have a 4-bedroom house, you may have 4 different TVs. Do we really need those 4 different TVs? So, and that means a lot of resources. So, it is not only earlier in old days, like when I was in IIT in this place, there used to be a concept called common room. It is still there. I'm not just joking, but that common room has not, it's not much common anyways these days. The students try to stick more in their they use it for some functions and all, but watching TV and all those stuff, it is becoming very uncommon. They try to do everything on their laptop in their room, because every room has a Wi-Fi and all that. But that's not, that's so, but that even in the individual houses, people are maybe they are watching a cricket game, IPL game, but they are watching in 4 different rooms, in 4 different laptops or 4 different TVs. That does not make any sense. So, we have to, we can rather live with only 1 TV in a house and we still have our decent. So, the way we are consuming resources is also becoming more and more unsustainable. So, that is what. So, if you look at this limit to growth and carrying capacity, is if you have a business as usual, you have the blue line, which is it's kind of fantasy kind of limits to the growth or reality, which we see over here, and sustainability or green communism, like if you have, then you will see a depth, or the world carrying capacity is right there in the middle at around 100. So, we have to kind of solution is to use the technological advances to increase the amount of prosperity per unit of resource. So, that is where the role of you and me, those of us who are engineers, and of course, other professionals also comes in picture. So, it is the technological advances we have to do, so that we can increase prosperity per unit of resource. We have to decouple resources from economy. So, that is the decoupling growth, which is we talk about many times. So, there is a risk that maintaining growth in a limited system by advances in technology can lead to overuse of the finite resource. Efficiency alone is not an effective induction of sustainability. So, we have to work on a different aspect here as well. So let's stop here, and we'll start with this in the next video, where we'll talk about the impact, how to calculate impact of and then the related stuff associated with that. So thank you, and again see you in the next video.